Alright, I wanted to make a quick video about the Canon R5 versus the Canon R6 Mark II. You're not going to see the R6 Mark II here in front of you because I rented that and I've already returned it. But I spent some time with the Canon R6 Mark II, and I had already had the Canon R5, and I purchased the R5 when the R6 was available. The Mark II had not been released. I purchased this R5 about a year and a half ago. There are three big differences between the R5 and the R6 Mark II. First and foremost, the R5 street price is $3,400 and the R6 Mark II's street price is $2,300. So the R5 is $1,100 more expensive than the R6 Mark II. Second big difference is the R5 has a 45 megapixel camera. A 45 megapixel sensor, and the R6 Mark II has a 24.2 megapixel sensor. So the R5 has 21 more megapixels than the R6 Mark II. And then the third difference is the one stop of better light performance or ISO performance on the Canon R6 Mark II. And you can see that in the ISO range specifications online. The R5 is rated from ISO 100 all the way up to 5100, expandable to 100,000. And the R6 Mark II is specifications on the ISO are 100 to 100,000, expandable to 200,000. And if you look at the photons to photo website, and you plot the noise versus ISO graph with the R5, and you compare it against the R6 Mark II, you can see all the way past 600 to 800 ISO, the R6 consistently beats the R5 by one stop of light. So you can get just about one stop's worth of ISO better with the same amount of noise with the R5. And that's probably due to the smaller amount of megapixels or small amount of pixels in the R6 Mark II versus the R5. So you just get all the way after about 600 or 800 ISO, you get just about one stop of better light performance out of the R6 Mark II. One thing I do want to also expand on that, if you plot the R6 Mark II against the R3 or the 1DX Mark III, the R6 Mark II has just about the same low light performance with comparable amount of megapixels, around the range of 20, 24 for those two cameras as well. So I think the R6 Mark II low light performance is remarkable and near the best. However, it's a trade-off between megapixels. So one more thing I do want to point out is looking at the dynamic range of the R5 and the R6 Mark II, you can see that they perform very similarly and are only beat by the R3, and that too just a little bit. So you do get one stop of better light performance with the R6 Mark II, but you also get 45 megapixels with the R5, all while having this roughly about this same dynamic range performance at the respective ISOs. Whoever's looking to purchase these, I think you need to decide. What I would suggest and what I did is I was really compelled by that one stop of extra low light performance to actually rent and try the R6 Mark II. In practice, it is noticeable. However, when you start seeing the noise, or at least when I started seeing noise, I was seeing them in both images to where the one stop of light performance for me did not justify sacrificing 21 megapixels. And of course, there's a $1,100 price tag as well for those 21 megapixels. I would suggest looking at pictures, and that's what I did. I went back and I looked at pictures that I'd already taken and looked at which ISO ranges I generally shoot at. And with the type of glass I use the EF 24 to 70 2.8 L lens, and I use the EF 70 to 200 2.8 L lens. Those are wide. Those are nice wide apertures. And I also use this Nifty 50 that's native to the RF in 1.8. So I usually don't struggle with ISO or low light performance. And then the IBIS coupled with the 70 to 200s image stabilization, or the IBIS in general, generally gives a few more stops of light. Now, with that said, if you're shooting really fast moving subjects, your IBIS isn't going to help. You're still going to encounter motion blur. And then also look at what are the lighting conditions for when you are shooting fast subjects. Are you shooting wildlife at low light at dusk? Then you probably want to go with the R6 Mark II. Now, if you're shooting sports in great light conditions, not indoors necessarily, maybe motor sports outside or sports outside or arenas that are very well lit, I personally would probably take the extra resolution over the one stop of light. And also keep in mind what lens you're coupling with it. If you're coupling it with $10,000 telephoto lenses at 500 millimeters focal length, along with very nice large apertures, I think with that level of equipment, you'll easily make up for the one stop of low light performance, and you'll be benefit, since you're shooting that type of professional work, you'll benefit from the 45 megapixels in terms of getting out excellent high resolution photos. Anyways, moving on to a couple of other differences. Frames per second electronic shutter. On the R5, probably because of the sheer size of the files, you only get 21 frames per second with the electronic shutter, which is still immensely fast. And then with the R6 Mark II, you can get 40 frames per second, which is absolutely insane. There's no excuse not to get the shot unless you're just out of focus. And then in the R6 Mark II, the autofocus was a little bit better, a little bit stickier. Although I came from shooting the 6D Mark II, so the R5's autofocus is R6 Mark II was excellent as well, but the performance with this mirrorless R5 from what I'm used to is so insane with the eye focusing that I didn't find a limitation or a realized benefit of the R6 Mark II. With that said, I don't shoot sports. I don't shoot wildlife primarily, so I'm not heavily dependent on that. If you are, it may be of benefit to you. Second, another minor difference is the dedicated video button or video switch on the R6 Mark II. You can get around that with the R5 by remapping one of the buttons up here to switch between video, one extra step, and you could potentially inadvertently hit it, but I don't usually ever inadvertently hit it, and you can remap that. So that's less of a point. Video recording, there's no limit on the R6 Mark II. There's a 30-minute video recording on the R5. Also, there's R5 will do 8K at 30 frames per second and 4K at 60 frames per second, and the R6 Mark II will do 6K raw through the HDMI out at 60 frames per second, which is impressive. But again, you have to have a separate recorder. And then it will do 4K at 60 frames per second. So if you're looking at 4K 60 frames, the R6 Mark II and the R5 will get, both of those will get you there. And from comparisons online, I think I saw that the R6 Mark II's video recording performance, even at the higher at 4K, was outperformed that of the R5's. And I believe one of what I was reading online, or what I read or saw in a video, is that the R5 does pixel binning, and because of that, the R6 video resolution was superior, or video quality at 4K was superior. I mean, it's hard; you can only really notice it side by side, but it was a touch better. And then the IBIS and the battery type are the same. Battery life maybe a touch better on the R6 Mark II, but other than that, the R6 Mark II does lose this top screen. I do really like that readout screen. So long story short, I ended up sticking with my R5 largely because I didn't believe that one thing, I already own it. Second, I didn't believe the I would recoup the exact price difference between the two. So I probably would be out $500. So I would take a 21 megapixel hit, and only gain really. So my only gain would be, for my uses, would be the one stop of low light performance. And I compared the samples of pictures I took. I also compared samples online. And what I began to realize is you can do a lot of things unless you're shooting fast subjects moving in low light. You can do a lot of things with the R5 to make up for that one stop of low light performance in terms of increasing the aperture, shooting at 45 megapixels at the higher ISO, and then post downscaling it to 24 megapixels and then regaining the noise. Then at that point, when you downscale the R5's raw files from 45 megapixels to 24 megapixels, the noise outperforms the R6 Mark II's noise performance. But there's one extra step of having to downscale the pictures. But at the same time, you have 45 megapixels to work with. When I originally purchased the R5, I did consider the R6. And the reason I went with the R5 was largely because of the extra 25 megapixels. Now, I'm a little bit biased because I already own this, but I think that $1,100 savings, as long as you don't need the extra resolution. If you don't need the extra resolution, I would suggest the R6 Mark II, and then take that $1,100 and put it towards some really nice native RF glass or even EF glass. I mean, the $1,100 can go a really, really long way in terms of some nice lenses. And if that's going to be a constraint, if the $1,100 difference is going to be the difference between the ability to get, native or L series glass, I would absolutely get the R6 Mark II and get the better glass as opposed to going for the resolution, unless you need it. But if the price difference is not going to make a difference between L glass, then it's harder to pick one or the other. You have to decide, do you want the resolution? I wouldn't say it's like a complete landslide, like absolutely just go get the the R5 versus the R6 Mark II. But so if the price difference isn't going to like prevent you from getting better glass, then it's a toss up. I would probably still lean towards the R5 just because the 45 megapixels, it's insane. You can really crop. You got to also decide when you shoot, are you going to be cropping down or not? That's one thing to keep in mind. But if the $1,100 difference makes a difference between getting better glass or getting the extra lens, I would absolutely get the R6 Mark II and get the better lens or get the glass you need. If you're still going to be able to get the same glass, then I guess you have the benefit of just picking. And if you need the extra resolution and you crop and you're shooting in good light conditions, get the R5. If you're going to primarily do video or you shoot in low light conditions with fast moving subjects, I would absolutely suggest the R6 Mark II. Also, if you're doing a lot of video and you don't care about that 45 megapixel resolution or 8K, if you're going to primarily do video, I get the R6 Mark II. So to sum it up, R6 Mark II for video and fast moving subjects in low light, and the R5 if you crop and need a lot of resolution. But if you still do video occasionally, R5 is absolutely not going to disappoint you. All right, I hope that helped clarify some things. I figure since I spent some time behind both of the cameras, I just share that. There are tons and tons of videos comparing them, but this is just my take on it. Hope that helped.